So now I want to get into module 2B, which the overall theme is there are a lot of experiences in life and they affect us in different ways, and a lot of it can feel uphill. And we want to make sure that we take that all into account when we're helping someone. So the first invitation is to really assess everything the person has been through. And a lot of us are going to check off many of these. If we've had any kind of career, job setback, educational, had to delay college or failed a course or things like that, parental divorce or step parents we had trouble with, physical assault or threats, thefts and robberies, things, losing friends, geographic moves, then getting into relationships, any kind of turmoil, breakups, our own divorces. The person could have been abused or assaulted or just had very uncomfortable or threatening sexual situations. They might have experienced deception or lies or scams, manipulations that are significant ones that they still remember, that still bother them. Certainly car accidents, injuries. We want to list these. They may not all be affecting the person. Some people recover just fine from certain events. We'll get into that, why sometimes we recover fine, usually because the mind makes sense of it and doesn't keep asking questions, doesn't get all wigged out by it, compared to the ones where we just keep asking, why me or why this? We'll get more into it, but not every trauma. In fact, only 10% of people that go through a severe trauma get PTSD. So that's kind of interesting. And so a lot of people talk about resilience, but it doesn't mean the other 90% are doing just fine. So anyway, it's healthy to just take the full assessment. They might have had friends that completed a suicide. When I dealt with military people, they'd have a lot. They knew a lot of people that had killed themselves, and they themselves might have tried once or twice in the past. They might have family deaths or friends, close friends. We get into some more vague ones that are usually not included in research. So just I know that people experience major humiliations. They could suffer as outcasts for some reason. Certainly with adolescents, you're going to have a lot of this kind of thing going on with schools and bullying. A lot of people experience involuntary hospitalizations, which can be traumatizing in itself. Captivity, arrest, being thrown in a squad car. Down here is stuff about discrimination. They might have been homeless, refugees, immigrants, some kind of starting over in their lives. Obviously, war, combat, those kind of exposures. People have had their homes burned down, floods, earthquakes, fires, all those kind of things. Injustices, lack of due process. A lot of people were convicted, false convictions being overturned, or sometimes they don't get overturned. Or lack of due process, maybe something at work with your HR department, accusations, all sorts of things happen. Or we have extreme penalties, arbitrariness in the system, who suffers, who doesn't, who has consequences, who doesn't. It could build a lot of resentment. We might have been a perpetrator at some point in our lives, caused harm to others or to ourselves, and that takes some dealing with. Or just any kind of other regretful past actions, decisions. So most people are going to have a number of these depending on their age and experiences, and there's room for more with the other, not with the other. But then you're going to want to help them narrow it down. Like, okay, of all those, let's just try to pick. And initially I'll say up to 4, and down here I want to get it down to 1 or 2. So here I'll be like, okay, so what are some of the most significant events in your life? And if there was a divorce or childhood stuff, that's usually going to show up, or a step parent they didn't get along with or something. But then you might get more into a more event type thing like a sexual assault, or their own divorce. Okay. So then you're going to say, okay, of these, which are the ones that still kind of show up in your dreams the most? What still shows up a lot? That's a way to know if it's still having an influence. So they may try to avoid something as intense as the sexual assault, but you're going to want to say, let's not leave that out. Like, okay, you want to process something that happened with your step parent or your divorce. but let's include that one. So I would try to include one or two here just to try to hedge my bets that we're still dealing with something intense enough to make these exercises necessary. I definitely was fooled a few times where I think something more severe happened than what the person ended up dealing with in the program. And so the benefit with people that didn't benefit a lot, there were a couple where I just really suspected a guy had downplayed something that definitely seemed more intense than what he said was his trauma. It had to do with a sexual thing. And anytime there's sexual stuff or stuff with confusion about sexuality or experimentation, those things tend to have more impact. But there's sometimes they feel more shameful or embarrassing to deal with. So a person may not be willing to admit some of those. And again, I've tried to write this thing also as a do-it-yourself. If your job is more to introduce the person and get out of the way, then maybe they'd be more willing to delve into some of these things themselves. Especially knowing that you don't even have to submit this thing at the end. It works. One big goal is just raising so much awareness, and it can do that even without ever submitting it. So then this section here starts to get impressions of like, well, as we're already bringing those things to mind, I call them gentle, making contact with these feared memories and things. As we're doing that, are any of these starting to kick up? Are you starting to feel tearful? And some people might say, yeah, a little, or you might see them and they're getting upset. Are they having trouble breathing? They might realize, yeah, and then their heart rate has increased. And is your mouth going dry? Oh, I didn't even think of that. But yeah, maybe kind of. Clenching jaw, yeah, come to think of it, I've been starting to tighten. My legs are shaking. So maybe that's more this one, but muscles tightening and shaking tend to go together. Are you getting lightheaded? Yeah, I'm feeling a little something. Adrenaline starting to pump as I remember these things, go through that list. Yeah, I'm feeling a little warm. Nothing's happening with my vision, but yeah, my thoughts are starting to race. I'm starting to remember those days. So these are some typical responses you might get. And then we go on into module 2C.